Last night, my wife and I found ourselves in the middle of a disagreement. She had been looking forward to a party her friends had arranged for weeks. I, however, felt uneasy about the whole thing. I told her plainly that I didn't want her to go. Not because I wanted to restrict her freedom, but because something inside me warned against it. She dismissed my concern with a half-smile, saying I was simply being too protective. Despite my words, she dressed up and left, leaving the house quiet behind her. I stayed in the living room, the ticking of the clock growing louder as each hour passed. My thoughts churned with questions I couldn't silence. What could be so important about that gathering that she chose it over hearing me out? I didn't call or send a message. I just sat still, letting the silence wrap itself around me like a weight I refused to shake off. It was close to 2 in the morning when she finally came home. The sound of her laughter lingered in the air as she stepped through the door, carrying the faint scent of alcohol and perfume. She acted casual, as though nothing had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I glanced at her once and then kept my silence. She noticed, but instead of offering any words, she slipped into the bedroom and closed the door. Sleep never came to me that night. I lay awake, feeling overlooked, as if my feelings had been set aside without a second thought. Morning arrived, and I braced myself for her to carry on as though the night before hadn't mattered. But she surprised me. She was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. I watched her quietly from the table. She moved slower than usual, as though she carried some invisible weight. When she finally sat down, she avoided my eyes, her face carrying traces of guilt. Then she began to speak, softly at first, admitting she had been selfish. She said the party had felt important in the moment, but she realized too late that disregarding me was wrong. Her voice trembled as she told me how empty the night had felt, even surrounded by friends and laughter. None of it had satisfied her because she knew she had hurt me. That guilt, she said, stayed with her long after the music faded. I let her speak, not interrupting. She apologized, not just for going against my wishes, but for making me feel like my opinion didn't matter in our marriage. It had been a long time since she had been that open with me, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. Even so, I didn't offer instant forgiveness. I told her that words mattered less than actions. Marriage, I reminded her, wasn't only about love. It was about valuing each other's emotions, even when we saw things differently. She nodded with tears gathering in her eyes, promising that she would change, that she would start putting us before me. For the first time, she seemed to understand the weight of my silence the night before. It wasn't fueled by anger. It was born of disappointment. That morning, the heaviness between us began to ease as we shared breakfast. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was the beginning of one. She realized that trust and respect were far more important than fleeting pleasures. In the days that followed, her efforts were clear. She made it a point to include me in her decisions, to ask for my perspective, and to treat our choices as something we built together. It wasn't about control. It was about respect and balance. Looking back now, I see how easily that night could have driven a wedge between us. Instead, it forced us to confront what had been left unsaid. My silence spoke volumes, more than raised voices ever could. And the next morning, for the first time in a long time, we spoke from the heart. She admitted she had been wrong to disregard me, and she confessed how hollow the party felt without my support. Her apology was genuine, and I told her that I needed more than words. I needed her to honor my feelings. She promised she would, and I in turn promised to trust her more. That morning, the gap between us began to close. We chose understanding instead of resentment, and that choice made our bond stronger. Silence turned into conversation. Distance turned into closeness. And in that moment, we learned once again what our marriage required most: respect.